Welcome, welcome on an April afternoon. I'm still letting people in. I'm Katie McKnight, and I'm here with my co-host, my partner in crime, my literacy sister, Dr. Jenny French. And
Hi.
yeah, and if you wouldn't mind, just over in the chat area, if you can just let us know where you're all coming online from. I see you, Libby Perry. I feel like, romper room. I see you, Libby Perry.
Mhm.
A couple people I know here, so very cool. All right, Lockhart, Texas, Louisiana, Edmonton, Alberta. Hello. I've been to Edmonton actually. And I'll never forget the snow was up to my hips and I'm a Chicago girl and everyone says, "Oh, it's not that bad, Katie. It's really not that bad." Another little factoid about Edmonton is that they have a couple of ski slopes like right in the city, which is pretty cool. So you got Atlanta, Florida, Oklahoma, Anderson, Indiana. Hi, Libby. And then and Wendy, hello. Oh, Wendy. Okay. All right, cool. She said I saw you when I was in Edmonton. That was a couple of years ago. It was like pre-pandemic. Everybody talks like pre and post-pandemic. So really happy that you're here. Okay, we're gonna get rolling. I am going to be watching the chat area, and Dr. Jenny is gonna start us off. We have an action-packed hour. We're going
Right.
to tell you everything that you need to know about reading and literacy skill development in the content area in 1 hour, right? So here we go.
Chalk block.
Yeah,
Yeah. You want to mention our podcast first? You want
yes, we do. So
to?
so like many people right now, we have a podcast. And actually, the reason why Jen and I started the podcast is that it seems like so much of the discussion right now and science of reading and research and evidence-based reading and strategies and literacy development is more for the little people. And as we know, middle schoolers, high schoolers, and I'll even go down to like fourth and fifth grade because usually we have some intermediate teachers here too, that it's quite different. And there's a lot of things that we have to look at that are really unique because we're delivering reading and literacy instruction, solely within the content areas. And many of us who teach at that level didn't have a reading background. I developed my reading chops in graduate school and working on my doctorate. So anyway, so that's on Spotify. So if you follow that link, if you just type out like Science of Reading, grades 4 through 12, McKnight and French, it'll pop up. So and our podcasts are generally shorter. We try to keep to 30 minutes or less, which is usually somebody's drive to or from school. So, and that's kind of the motivation there. All right, so here we go. And our first question and just type it in the chat area if you could. What is currently, like at this precise moment, what is currently your greatest challenge, would you say, in the area of literacy? So if you would just go ahead and put that in there in the chat area, that would be fantastic. Yep, student motivation. Thanks, Nicole.
For sure.
I'm hearing that a lot in schools of just and then the tenacity too, just the stick with itness, the
Mhm.
stamina. Um, yep, and kids not reading on grade level. Alana, I just read that in the US, the National Assessment for Educational Progress, the latest data is indicating prior to the pandemic, it was about 66% of kids in eighth grade were not reading on level. We're up to 75. And that is just jarring. So we have a lot of work to do. Yep, seventh grade reading level. Yep, and on the second grade reading level, yes. Yeah, my son has autism too. He's 23, so I can relate to that too as a mom. Overall interest in reading. Thanks, Libby. Actual real usable strategies for high school students. Yeah, amen. So both of us have experience at that level as well. I always say, unless they're hormonal, I really don't understand them. So those are my people. And then students not paying attention to details. Yep. Important words that change the whole meaning. Yes. Okay. As well. All right, so we're going to look at, what does the research indicate? What does the evidence really say? Like, how do you move the needle? How do you move the needle for adolescent reading comprehension? And here's the good news. The good news is that it really boils down to seven things. And the solution is actually really simple. The hard part is the implementation and sustainability. That's always the hard part. So, how can I foster those deeper levels of comprehension when students are reading and we're studying subject matter deeply? And that's the other part of it too, is that we don't want reading and writing and literacy strategies to supplant deep subject matter study. They should be there to support and strengthen and deepen students' skills, but it should never be to supplant subject matter. Okay. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to Jenny first. We're going to talk a little bit about the reading rope really briefly, because this is really the model du jour right now and the basis of things. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jen. If you have questions, things like that over in the chat area, I'm hanging out over there. So I'm going to turn off my camera for now.
Yeah, and I know that you most likely are familiar with this, but I feel like it kind of tees up our conversation really well. And I want to start by hitting some of those word recognition strands. And so if you're not familiar with reading rope, just real quickly, everything on the left is what a teacher or what a student's mind has to have going on simultaneously in order to teach reading comprehension. So this fact that we're teaching reading comprehension is really a myth. We're not teaching reading comprehension. We're teaching one of these skills, or students have a deficit in one of these skills that's leading to the lack of comprehension. So an assessment that really decouples the language comprehension from the word recognition piece is really important. And we typically don't have that at the secondary level. But once we have that, we can actually diagnose where the deficit is and then treat it, or diagnose it and treat it appropriately. What I want to kind of tee us up for first is this word recognition piece, because this is a little more just separated from a secondary teacher skill set where they're not comfortable because they're expert in literature and teaching different types of writing and genres, not on teaching decoding. So I want to hit a few pieces of the rope, and I'd like to start with phonological awareness because it is important at the secondary level as well. So it's really the ability to recognize and manipulate speech sounds. That is the foundation for learning to print language. And if they're missing that, they're not going to get it anywhere else. You can't circumvent that piece. And so I like to show it like a graphic like this. So if we think about language development or skills to develop in language, everything hinges on the sound, on hearing sounds. So if you are learning Spanish, if you are learning Russian, you have to tune your ear to different types of sounds. So there's something in the brain called narrowing perception of language. And so when we're less than 1 year old, our brain starts dropping off the ability to pick up different languages if I'm in an English speaking household. So my mind kind of just diminishes those aren't needed. And so I will never trill my R's like a true Hispanic because I was raised by Hoosiers in Indiana. So it's whatever your baby ears are used to hearing. And so in any language, whether you're working with EL students or multi-language learners or even native speakers, if they're missing that sound, think about it. If they're not hearing all the syllables in the word, when they go to write a word, they're going to just write what they're hearing. So that first part that's most important is being able to tune the ear into all of the sounds. And then one, like a stack of bricks, the foundation of reading, we can't miss one of these steps, because if we're struggling with writing, but we're not hearing those sounds, that's going to impact our spelling. Spelling overall impacts our clarity of communication. Same thing with fluency. If we're not hearing the sounds or reading fluently, not reading fluently is going to impact our comprehension. If our comprehension is impacted, we're not going to write about what we read clearly or accurately. So that sound is very important. The good news is it doesn't take a lot to fill in those gaps. So it's like 5 minutes a day for 12 weeks is the stats of just practicing this phonological awareness. of practicing and tuning in. So we can use it as like preventative or as an intervention. And I'm going to show you just a couple of quick examples of things you can do just as like a bell ringer or a warm up and I've done this even with high school students. So it's all how you sell it with anything. What somebody mentioned in the chat, one of the difficult things that they're struggling with, their challenge is just student motivation, getting students to care and to buy into something. So one of the kind of routes I like to take is that this isn't reading intervention, we're doing linguistics. Linguistics is the study of language. It's the fastest growing major in the country right now because of AI, and AI is built on language models. And so we're going to do some linguistics practice. And so here's kind of a look at what those might look like. And if you see this chart here, it's showing us more on the more sophisticated side or complex part of the phonological and phonemic awareness scale. So try it with me. I know that your mics are muted, and that's fine, but you can still do it along with me just for the effect. So I'm going to ask my students, say peas without the p, and you would say ease. Say sheet without the t. Sheen. Say stop without the s. Top. Say wild without the d. While. So that's just one example, or we can reverse speech sounds, which is one of the more complicated parts that you really have to practice and tune your ear in. And these are not easy for adults, and they're not easy for students either. So if I say the phonemes or the sounds in the word teach, the sounds I have are t, e, ch. Okay, so that's breaking up phonemes as one skill. So I'm tuning in my ear to each of those, and being able to do that is also a spelling skill. Now, if I'm going to reverse those, that's on that high end of complexity. So t, e, ch. Now I'm going to go backwards. Ch, e, t. So the word's cheat. So just some different things you can do. If there's how many phonemes are in the word sigh, s, I, there's 2. If we reverse them, I, s, ice. So we can do some different little tricks, like cuts breaks down to stuck, pitch breaks down to chip, backwards. So you can take a screenshot of that, and that's your warm up tomorrow for class. And just try that out with your students just to help tune in their ears to the sound of a language.
So Jen, I was just going to mention too, as you were presenting this too, so I wrote this in the chat area, and you're busy presenting, so it's hard to see what's going on in the chat. But what I put in the chat was that, tuning our ears, we need to pronounce new words for our kids. So the academic vocabulary, the content specific vocabulary, they need to hear it. And so often what I see is lists of words that are given to kids, but we don't break down the phonemes, the sounds, and then this also relates to Latin and Greek roots too, of just understanding those components. Because what happens to us at this level with the older students is, I'm sure you guys are hearing it too in classrooms, but I'm hearing it all over the place. So yesterday I was in several classrooms, and kids are miscuing words that they're reading, like the word was spatula, and the student read it as spectacular. And you'll see that they'll get the initial sound or the middle sound or the end sound, but they're not breaking it down as Jen is showing right now into those specific sounds and phonemes. So when we're giving vocabulary to the kids, we got to break it down too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so here's a ready to go activity. So just give that a try tomorrow and see how your students do. And again, it's linguistics. It's not babyish or immature. It is the study of the language. So that's a little piece of that thread just for your own understanding of the phonological awareness. And then I want to just touch on decoding and why it's so difficult. So the English language is very difficult when it comes to decoding. One, because we have one of the largest vocabularies in the world. Just to give you some reference, so the average adult knows around 40 to 60,000 words. If you're a well-educated or well-read adult, that increases your vocabulary to around 200,000 words. However, the English language contains close to 2 million words. So because of just our having a melting pot in language and the way that we've taught spelling. But decoding is very difficult, and it's There's two types of languages, opaque and transparent. It's not transparent. It doesn't have a clear 1-to-1 ratio. We have 26 letters, but those 26 letters can make 44 sounds. Those 44 sounds, there are 75 different ways to spell them. So when we think we're just teaching 26 letters of the alphabet, we really have to be teaching 44 sounds and then 75 different ways to spell. If we don't take that approach, which is like a phonics-based instruction, then we see the problems that we're seeing now with students not being able to have word attack skills or being able to break them down, because you think, okay, they know the letters and sounds, but there's so much more to that. And so something we can do just for these few strands here, we can incorporate just 5 minutes of phonological awareness. The activity that I showed you, it will provide it in the resources, but it's straight from Louisa Moat's guide, Speech to Print. She has an entire workbook of ready to go activities that you can use of these 5-minute phonological like practice that you could do for warm-ups. Another thing we want to do is teach spelling rules. So instead of just memorizing the word to know how to spell it correctly, we want to break it down into spelling rules. So there's typically like 30 spelling rules that we can teach. A great resource for that is Uncovering the Logic of English by Denise Ide. She also has a free website with resources, so I want to shout out to her. But for example, a spelling rule might be no English word ends in the letter I, U, J, or V. So for spelling, so if just knowing that. So even as a proficient reading adult, I didn't know that rule until, several years ago. If a word ends in the J sound, it's spelled with a DGE or a GE. If there's a long vowel sound, it's a GE. If it's a short vowel sound, it's a DGE, like page or budge. So that's a spelling rule. So instead of memorizing lots of lists of words, I can teach that rule. I can have kids apply that rule, come up with their own lists, and then they're memorizing that. And so that application of the rule gets much more return on your investment or bang for your buck. And then the other piece just to remember is students are not going to pick these skills up just like on their own going through their normal school day. They have to have explicit instruction around those word recognition skills. So where are they going to get that? If it's not in your classroom, it's got to happen somewhere. So there's got to be some type of specific teaching or curriculum that students are getting that, because they're not just going to pick up those skills. They've made it this far without picking up those skills. So somewhere during their day, they have to receive that explicit instruction. And then that kind of moves on. So if we think about that layer of bricks, so starting with sounds and decoding, and then we move up the scale to fluency. So just to give you kind of a big picture look at what fluency is and how it impacts our reading comprehension. So if we think about fluency as a definition of like this equation, so it's automaticity, which is I see a word and I know it immediately, like flashcard style. And then prosody, which just is a fancy word for expression. So it sounds natural, like when I'm speaking, when I read. So if we have that automatic piece and the expression piece, that equals fluency. And so here are just kind of some stats. If a student reads 1 minute a day, and when I'm going to define reading, so the real reading at their level, understanding it, eyes on page, reading aloud or reading in their head, not fake reading. This is what I mean by reading. So if they're having that reading experience, authentic reading experience for 1 minute a day, that is going to give them about 8,000 words a year in their vocabulary, and they're likely to score in the 10 percentile. If it's 5 minutes a day, that increases their words and gets them into about the 50th percentile of scores on standardized tests. 20 minutes has kind of been that magic number that we shoot for in schools. And that's where this research is a lot of reasons why schools implement the DEAR method, which is the drop everything and read in homeroom or whatever. Sometimes that is not effective because students aren't doing real reading during that time. It becomes a waste of instruction. But if they can do 20 minutes a day, that'll get them into the 90th percentile and over 1.8 million word exposure on a yearly basis, which is huge. So how do I teach and build fluency while I'm trying to actually teach my content? How do I do that? So I want to share just a few quick strategies that you can use regardless of what you're teaching, to support your students who aren't reading on grade level, that are easy to do, and again, age appropriate. So one thing I want to share, and this is from the Florida's Department of Education, their reading space is chock full of great activities. But this one is called Scooping, and it has age appropriate or age respectful resources. So it helps students to actually read in phrases and not do the robot word reading where they're reading one word at a time and it sounds really choppy. And so they practice this by looking at these phrases, and we explain to them that your eyes actually read several words at a time. Your mouth needs to be able to catch up with that. And so we're going to practice this by reading in phrases. The scooping part comes from a physical finger and being able to make that physical connection with a mental connection of practice. So I would put my finger under the we, and we know that, and I would make a physical scoop. So we know that. Set an example. Would you please? And so it's these kind of practices of making that piece where I'm reading smoothly and I'm reading in chunks versus reading we know that. That kind of choppy reading really slows down our comprehension also. And another way you can do that with your own text, whatever text you're using. If you're an ELA teacher, you can tie in some grammar there, teach fanboys or the conjunctions or connectives, circle those in the text, and then make your scoop starting with your first word on your conjunction, and then you make your scoop on that phrase. And so that's just a few of the scooping that we can try. Another one, and these are, I'm just going to share, there's several. I'm going to share my two favorite because they're easy to do, easy to get kids on board with, and you're going to see the most return on your investment. So whenever I work with schools, I say, just try these two things on a regular basis. And then if you don't see an impact, then I'll give you money because it works every single time. So this one is called choral reading. Some high school teachers kind of balk at this, but again, it's all how you sell it. You sell it to them. So choral reading, we're going to read all at the same time. And what this does, this creates a really safe space for students. Popcorn reading, and I can just even saying that, I know Katie's head will start spinning. The research is really negative around popcorn reading or kind of that just call on people randomly. That's not effective. Research has proven that over and over. It actually has negative impacts because of the physical feeling that it creates in struggling readers and learners. They just move into their brainstem. They can't focus. If we're going to read up and down the rows, I'm counting down the paragraphs of where I'm going to read and practicing in my head. I'm not following along to what somebody else is saying. So many reasons that's not effective. Choral reading is effective because everyone's doing it. Everyone's participating. So everyone's getting in those minutes of how many minutes a day we're reading. And I'm creating a safe space. So as a teacher, I'm going to read ahead of time. And then I'm going to say, okay, everyone follow me, mimic my prosody, stay on pace with me. And so we would just do these with short chunks of text, especially in science class. Read the first page, read the first paragraph together. That way you're pointing out any words that might be new or difficult to pronounce, and you cover those ahead of time. So point all those out. Here's how they pronounce them. Now I'm reading it. Now we're going to read together and everybody match and stay with my pace. Now do a turn and talk, or with your elbow partner, read chorally with them. Paragraph 2. So it's not something you're going to do a whole text. You're not going to do a whole article, but it's a way to get them started and just have that safe space for practicing fluency. Any questions, Katie? Should I stop there for a moment? I know I see the numbers on chat going up, but Roxanne, did you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's mostly me going back and forth.
Okay.
Roxanne's got one. What do you recommend for a student who struggles with lots of words? Do you correct? Oh, that's a great question. Do you correct every word or just a few to avoid embarrassment?
So yeah, I do think research says we need to correct that right away, but I would say do that in a safe space. So if they're reading out loud, I would probably create a different space of situation where they're going to read out loud. Either if they're chorally reading with a large group, the group can kind of carry them so they can at least kind of blend in with their voice and have practice. And then I would say, let's pair them with a stronger reader, or if you're doing small groups, that would be the place, but they do need immediate corrective feedback on that so it doesn't become a habit. But that's a great question. And I struggled with that when I first started teaching. My first few years, I was teaching 7th grade ELA, and I didn't want to make them feel bad. So I didn't correct them. And now I like cringe. I'm like, oh, Jenny, you were so young and dumb. You tried your best. But yeah, that they need that immediate corrective feedback.
So I actually I actually found it because like everybody's hard drive on their computer, it's like the packet drawer in the kitchen. And I just want to show you really quickly, like here's an example of what Jen is talking about. And it's from House on Mango Street, Sandra Cisneros. And so I just pasted it in the chat. And wherever it has the chorus, that's the chorus like repeating. And so it's the vignette that she has in there, Chanclas. And so Rachel is the main character is saying these things, and then the chorus, like we're repeating things that were from the original text and saying that in a choral reading and emphasizing like the message, the tone, important words. So, and how did I create that? I'll tell you how I created it. It was the delights of AI. I literally said, create a choral reader's theater script for Sandra Cisneros, blah, 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 copied the text, pasted it, threw it in there, and it did it. And I remember, now I'm going to sound really old, but when I started teaching in the late 80s, I was making scripts like this, reader's theater scripts. I didn't know at the time that this was a good reading strategy because I didn't know. And I just wanted to make the text accessible. And I was doing this with like The Pardoner's Tale from, by Chaucer. And I'm pounding it out on, yes, an electric typewriter. But that was before I had kids and a life. So, and I was doing those things. So it would take me like a whole weekend to write one script. Now you can do it on AI and it's great.
Yeah. So yeah, so if you're going to try, a couple of things, I would encourage just give choral reading a try for a short piece of text. And it's something you can do daily. Another real easy win is any instructions that you read on any assignment, read those chorally. Everyone's reading. Everyone's participating. We're not calling on one student and you're not doing it. Have the kids do the work. Everyone reads every instruction on assignments. Read those chorally as a class. Becomes part of just your normal everyday protocol. And then the second strategy I want to share with you is called read and review. This is one that I would use definitely on a weekly basis, sometimes more often, but it's great for content area teachers. And if you can get this being used department-wide. So it's being used in ELA class, maybe your ELA teachers introducing and teaching it to the science and social studies teachers. And then they're also utilizing it. So it becomes a really great protocol for your students. But what it looks like is we partner up. And it depends on how intentional you want to be. If you want to create those partner pairs ahead of time, so you have a strong reader or a weak reader, or you just say, hey, choose the person sitting next to you and spread out, whatever works in your environment. But what that looks like, if Katie's my partner, I'm going to read paragraph 1 out loud to her. And then I'm going to ask her a question about what I just read. So it's the read and review piece. So I'm skimming, I have to read the text to her. She knows that I'm getting ready to ask her a question. So she's paying attention to try to prepare for whatever question I'm going to ask her. After I read, I have to like synthesize that information, skim the text again in order to ask her that question. She's paid attention when I've read because she's waiting for that question. And then after I ask her that question, she most likely has to scan the text again to look for the answer. So we know that multiple readings increase comprehension. And by design, this protocol creates a space for those multiple readings to happen while they don't even realize they're doing it. And then we switch back and forth. So then Katie reads paragraph 2 to me, and she asks me a question over what she read. I respond, and we go back and forth. Now, this will extend the text, the time that it takes to read a text, exponentially, but it's worth the return on the investment. So I've seen this over and over again. And, it's one of those things like, hey, I'll bet you money. Next time I come back, this was like the old crotchety science teacher who like didn't want to be at the PD, was mad about having to be there because he teaches science and, not that. It's already been teaching 30 years. He already knows how to do everything. So I said, just like talk him into like giving it a try. And then when I come back next quarter, just let me know how it goes. And he literally like stood up in the lunchroom and was like, I'm really sorry because I did not think this was going to work. The only reason I did it was to prove you wrong. But all of my quiz scores went up 60%. And so I'm like, that is the best testimonial I've ever had in my life. So just give it a try. That repeated reading, it will extend the length that it takes to read a text, but it's highly worth it because their comprehension goes up. And then one of the resources that Katie and I always try to share is Saddleback Publishing, because having taught in the middle school ELA classroom, there isn't anything age appropriate that's decodable. Saddleback does an excellent job. Like, we don't work for them. We just really like their stuff. So if you're looking for stuff, they have specific like genre for newcomers about what it's like to be in school in the United States. That are really visually heavy, but like a low volume of text. They have all the classics, they have graphic novels, but everything is really accessible. So just wanted to share that. And then I'm going to stop talking for a little bit, Katie.
Yeah, I think it's my turn to talk.
Yeah.
So I got there we go. There's my camera. So now Jen's going to hang out in the chat area. So if you have any questions, things like that, and those two texts that I reference, that Reader's Theater one for a biology class on photosynthesis, and then the other one, the Cisneros choral reading example, I'll get those up into a resource folder so you have that as an example for your use. At the next barbecue, you can do like a Reader's Theater on photosynthesis. That should be fun. And so this is it. This is the slide that you've been looking for, the answer to the riddle that you have been seeking. And I prefaced it at the beginning of the webinar that this is it. This is the secret sauce to move the needle in adolescent reading comprehension. This is what you do. And the first is high level questions to drive motivation, engagement, and comprehension. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, DOK, Webb's work, Karen Hess's work, all on questioning and motivation. And this is huge. And so we need to have those good essential questions, because that really gives us the purpose for reading and the motivation for reading. And what I too often see are a lot of who, what, where, when types of questions, not anything like that is more essential questioning. Yeah, I need to go back. And then the next one on that list too is build background knowledge before reading. And that kind of came out of fashion for like the last 10 years, but it's coming back into fashion now. And background knowledge, I would say background knowledge plus vocabulary equals reading comprehension. If I don't have a piece of information, it's going to make that text really, really hard for me. And the argument used to be made in the past that, well, the kids need to be able to handle a cold read. You need to be able to handle a cold read. I want everybody to pause and think for a moment. When was the last time you did a cold read? That you were asked to read something and you knew nothing about the topic or why you were reading it? Most of us, the last time we did it was when we took the GRE or, ACT or some kind of standardized test. That's not normal. That's not how we read. So we don't read to find the main idea and three pieces of evidence. We read to answer a really good question, like what happens, what are the limits of friendship? How can an unexpected event lead to long-lasting consequences? That's what we want to get to. So those are the first two. I'm sorry, first three. Also, grade level text at the instructional level. Notice how I capitalize that. Grade level text at the instructional level. High level questions, and then building background knowledge. Now we can go to the next slide, Jen. There we go. Annotation with purpose. So I don't care what annotation system you use, but if you can be consistent and aligned with other subject areas and within your content area, That's massive. One of the most popular ones is Notice and Note with Kylene Beers and Bob Probst. Really great system. They have it for literary text as well as informational text. So if you can get everybody on board on that, that is really valuable. And then notice that I say intentional vocabulary instruction. We could do a whole webinar just on vocabulary. And the most important thing about vocabulary is just like round robin reading doesn't work or popcorn reading doesn't work, giving kids lists of words and having them memorize definitions is not the way to learn vocabulary. And then graphic organizers, if you're using them, awesome. Keep using them. They are fabulous tools, and these are all research-based strategies and approaches that lead to greater reading comprehension with teenagers, and then summarization of text too. So any opportunity to summarize text, and then I think something got wrong with the formatting, but also evidence-based writing. And again, I was in a school, two schools yesterday, and just kind of doing like an overview and doing an analysis of what was going on in those two schools. And I would say there were 6 different frameworks for evidence-based writing going on, and pick one, and everybody's got to die on the same hill. And so we may not be 100% in agreement, but if you're more than like 75% in agreement, then you got to do it, because what happens, you got to let it go, just like Elsa and Frozen. You got to let it go, because what happens is I'll go to Jenny's class and she's using apes, and then I'll go to my friend Richard's class and he's using the ACE strategy, and then I go to my friend David's class and they're using Melcon. What happens is I'm using my cognitive load on learning these different structures and different classes that are all accomplishing the same thing, which is evidence-based writing. So pick one and explain how you use it in social studies, in science, in mathematics. And that's a whole other webinar too. All right. And then I want to share this too about levels of reading comprehension, because this has to go with the questioning and why the questioning is so important. So some would say that there's 4 levels of reading comprehension. Some would say that there are 5. I like to simplify things. There's really 3: literal, inferential, and evaluative. Literal is that right there: who, what, when, where. And then inferential, we oftentimes say read between the lines, which doesn't make any sense to any kid. That is really about your background knowledge and making inferences. And it's really hard to teach that. And how do kids develop inferencing skills is when we model it. And then the last is that evaluative. I've got to go beyond that text. And there's a bunch of states right now that have standardized tests right now for reading comprehension that are getting really at this on that evaluative level. So let me give you an example. I have a beautiful introduction to a text where it says the leaves were changing to red and orange and yellow, and there was a chill in the air. A literal question is, what color were the leaves? I don't even have to read that sentence, and I can tell you red, orange, and yellow because I just skimmed it. So when we ask those literal questions, it doesn't prompt deep reading. Inferential: what season is it? The leaves were changing to red, orange, and yellow, and there was a chill in the air. Anybody except in the state of like Arizona, maybe New Mexico, and parts of Texas, they're going to have no problem saying that that's fall. Kids who live in near Death Valley in California may have some difficulty with that, because my background knowledge growing up in the Midwest, I know when that happens, it's autumn. And then evaluative is using the text for evidence, make an argument, or why do you think, what season is the best and why? Or why would some people prefer fall? Or why would fall be colorful? Or something like that. Then we're getting at those higher levels. Yeah, so that's when we're getting at those higher levels. So this is relevant for what we're going to talk about next. So this, some of you may have seen this, but background knowledge is so important, and it's really, really hard with fellow educators to pick something because y'all are so smart and we know so many things. So what do you think the topic is in this sentence? The notes were sour because the seam split. What do you think the topic is? So just really quickly, just put it in the chat area or just think about it really quickly. The answer is, drum roll. How many of you thought it was like wine or bourbon or whiskey? Wine is the number one answer in California. If there's any California teachers online, whenever I'm in California, all the teachers are like, it's wine, Katie. They won't entertain anything else. If I'm in Kentucky, it's bourbon. If I'm in Tennessee, it's whiskey. Yeah. Okay. Yay, Nicole. Thanks for saying that. She just sent me a direct message. So we have one teacher who said yes, or one educator who said it's wine. It's actually about a musical instrument. And the musical instrument is bagpipes. So if you don't have that piece of information, usually when when we're all together and in a space together and I can see everybody, usually what happens is the audience or the participants will go, oh, like it's that aha, it makes sense now, right? So the notes were sour because the seam split. So your background knowledge is massive. And think about our kids. Our kids actually know a lot. They know more. My seventh grade grandson, he knows more about Minecraft than I would ever care about in my entire life. So they actually know a lot of things, but it may not necessarily be what they're going to study. So same school yesterday, they're reading The Outsiders, and the teacher is really getting them ready, and they're taking topics from the 1960s and researching them for a day before they actually go into the text. And it really it just helps, especially with inferencing and those deeper levels of reading comprehension. Okay, I'm ready to go to the next one there, Jen. So do you want to talk about this slide,
Yeah,
Jen?
just
Okay.
I think this is important because when I heard this fact or this stat, it kind of blew my mind and I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. But one of the reasons that our students struggle with background knowledge and have such limited background knowledge is because, and if you're fans of Natalie Wexler or her work, this is the first time I read the stat was in the Knowledge Gap, her text, but only 1% of students in primary grades, so K1 and 2, 1% are receiving instruction on science. There Roxanne just held up the book. Yeah. Are receiving instruction on science and social studies. And when I share that with middle school science and social studies teachers, they're like, oh, that makes perfect sense because they know nothing when they come to me in sixth grade. Because yeah, 1% of primary. And then when we get to intermediate grades, science and social studies, maybe instruction is very limited. So maybe they get science for a quarter of the school year, the first semester, and it's only 45 minutes the week. But if there's a fog delay in the morning or an assembly or a pep rally or whatever, it's the first thing to get cut out of the schedule because you can't cut ELA and math. So those were the first things taken away. So I think that's a huge area of one of the reasons why we have this huge knowledge deficit in our schools. But
I would dare to say it's quite a tragedy, actually.
Mm.
And that it really is a tragedy. A lot of folks don't understand that deep subject, having a broad, rich, diverse curricula actually improves reading. And good readers tend to know a lot about a lot of different things. And so I just put, in your copious free time, and I mean that with all the sarcasm I can, because educators never have any free time. But the Knowledge Gap is in there, Natalie Wexler, and Dan Willingham's work. I've been a fangirl of Dan Willingham's work for like my whole, like once I found him, which was when I was working on my PhD. His book is The Reading Mind, and he is the one who just keeps crying out on that hill about background knowledge and rich curricula, and doing that. So, okay. And then I want to talk a little bit about vocabulary, but specifically about Greek and Latin roots. This is like one of my themes this year, and the hill I'm going to die on this year. Teach the Latin and Greek roots. So one school that I know of in Illinois, they deliberately started drilling down into teaching Latin and Greek roots, and they have like 10 each quarter for each of the different grades, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. They're on a word wall on the way to the cafeteria. So when the kids are in line getting their milk and tater tots, they're looking at these, Latin and Greek roots. and then they're emphasizing it in their classrooms. So if one of the roots is like photo, and I'm in a class, an ELA class, and a character is described as photogenic, the teacher points it out, or photosynthesis, or photosensitive, or something like that. Well, here's what happened. Just that little thing, talking about a quick win, easy to implement and huge gain. And this is my thing about alignment too, is that, everybody's on the same page. They went up in vocabulary by 69% on their benchmark. And if I remember correctly, they use iReady. And they went up 69% from September until February. And that was like their biggest thing that they had changed that year. So that's what happens. So we can go to the next slide.
So Shauna has a great question. She said,
tons of lists.
How do you choose which ones per grade level? Do you have any recommendations for that?
There's tons of lists out there. And the other thing too, Shauna, is it really doesn't matter that much. So there are lists of Latin and Greek roots. I would just divide them out and 6th, 7th, and 8th grade and send them out. Because here's the other thing too. Even though a kid learned Latin and Greek roots when they were in about 4th grade, like for instance, they may have learned subway, submarine. But when we get into middle school and high school, I'm taking that same thing, sub, which means under, and then I have maybe in my earth science class, I have subterranean. Or I might have in my ELA class, I'm reading an Edgar Allan Poe story and it's subliminal. And so I understand it on a more concrete level, which is more characteristic in elementary school. But now we're getting into these nuances and content specific that we need to address. So yes, they most likely had Greek and Latin roots when they were younger, but they have to be visited constantly and it has to be recursive. So Shauna, I don't have a list. I wonder if there's some good list out there, but honestly, I don't think it makes all that difference. Dividing them up, just teaching them is really key. Okay, so the next couple of slides, they're really there more for your reference. And so let's just kind of keep going there. Yeah. And then the root words, I already talked about that. There's my shameless plug for one of my books. Yeah, especially our multilingual learners. Okay. And then how can I do this in my class? So some real quickies there. Just put them up. I mean, that's it. Just make web diagrams, and there's some common ones there that you can use. There you go, Shauna. There's 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. There you go. You're set. And you can just use those. And then, just roots that they can reference. They can have like little, my friend who co-authored my book with me, Lisa Hollis, she just does these little cards, and they're just the roots, and they're on a key ring, and the kids just reference them. So yeah. Yep. Do you want to talk about this slide there, Jen?
Yeah, one of the things, there's the top 100 most commonly used affixes and roots. You can just Google that online. And then, yeah, the list, like making those progressive. So yeah, you have 30 in 6th grade. You have those, now you have 60 in 7th, you have 90 in 8th grade. But yeah, like Katie said, you keep going. So here's just a few different ways you can use it. Like she mentioned, the word walls. This kind of picture is one I love. It's like the word mapping or the word matrix. So again, here's a bell ringer. You put this up on the screen as students are coming in, and tell them to build as many words as they can with these combinations. And so you can put up different roots they have to understand, and then you can challenge one another. That's not a word. Well, you know what? It might not be in the dictionary, but can you define what it would mean if you understood all the parts? And so it gets very gamey. So that's a great one to share. And you can look up that. Morphology Matters is a free website with tons of great resources.
Yeah. And then, the book that I was referring to and a lot of those strategies are from Lisa Holohan Allen, who she's actually a reading specialist in Wisconsin. And she co-authored that book with me, the strategies to support struggling adolescent readers. So I put a link in there too, if you want to take a look at it. But yeah, again, like previewing vocabulary, it's gobsmacking to me when I ask kids to preview vocabulary, what they know and what they don't know. And it also tells me a lot about background knowledge. So not only am I introducing words and breaking down words, I usually find out things about their background knowledge, and which is really evident in this. And it's just a simple, T-chart. And notice that I have an essential question because we were reading passages from Dr. King and other civil rights leaders, and this was in an ELA class, a unit that they were doing. Okay, so let's keep going. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on annotation, just really the importance of doing it. And because what it does is it triggers more active reading. So I want to show you a quick example of this. So sticky notes, this has been around forever. And in your resource folder, I included a resource there that explains the strategy in depth. And then ready to use so you can use it in classrooms. And feel free to copy that, give it to whomever you'd like. You can give it to your letter carrier, your Amazon guy, whoever you want to give it to. And oh, actually go back to that one. And basically what it does, yeah, right there, is that, question, comment, connection. So as I'm reading through the text, I ask questions, I have personal connections, I make comments. And you'll see that like Notice and Note by Kylene Beers and Bob Probst, that it's a similar kind of thing. They get more detailed with their annotations. And then, yes, even in math class, you would use this. So imagine if I use sticky notes, I have one common annotation system for the students, and I'm using it in science class, ELA class, and then in mathematics. So we can flip through the next slide there. So there's a math example there with a word problem. And then look at me getting all fancy, the literacy educator having an algebraic equation at the end there. So I'm feeling very sassy there. So why do questions matter? They're massive as far as comprehension. So I know we've talked about essential questions in the past, or I've talked about them, or you've studied them, and probably have had PD on them. They're not new by any means. Yeah, you're welcome, Troy. I'm sorry I didn't spend more time on that, but I wanted to give an example of like, yeah, you use these reading strategies even in math class. So let's go to the next slide there. And just keep going so I can get to the meat of it. So here's this came, I'll tell you right where it came from. This is a social studies example. And it is from Read Like a Historian. And it's a wonderful site and it's free. The best, letter that begins with F is free. Okay. And so we take the concept and then develop a good question. So how did populist leaders appeal to the people? And so we're going to take a text. Well, actually, what I'm going to do is give them background knowledge, background information. So the next couple of slides do that, Jen, so we can flip through that. I can just talk through those. So here are some snapshots of what, the farmers' problems were, because that was like the root of the populist movement. And then there's a lithograph with farmers and things, and we can talk about what we see. And then this was the presidential election in 1892. What do you notice? Same thing with 1896, almost like a gallery walk. Like, what do you understand about this? What do you see? So I'm building some background knowledge. Now let's look at some text. So we're going to find the main idea and 3 pieces of evidence. Okay. So looking at this text right now, what I want you to do, I'm just going to give you 2 minutes, or not even that, 1 minute, because we're close on time, is I want you to look at it and I want you to find the main idea and 3 pieces of evidence. Okay. So go. Okay. So I know that wasn't quite a minute. All right. So the prompt is, yep, thanks, Shauna. So the prompt is find the main idea and 3 pieces of evidence. Okay, so go ahead and click because it'll highlight things. Okay, yeah, go there. So that's what I have for the main idea and some supporting evidence that's in there, okay? And I could highlight that or annotate it. All right, now I want to show you the difference. Now go to the next slide there, Jen. All right, so here it is. I've got it all highlighted there, what my main idea is, and then my supporting evidence, okay? All right, now I want you to look at it this way with annotation of that question, comment, connection. So this is William Jennings Bryan's Cross of Gold speech at the Democratic National Convention. Oh, just flip back and just go ahead and read that passage. And every time you have a question, comment, connection, just kind of record it in your head. Okay, so I realize you may have not gotten completely far enough, but I just really wanted to put you in that stance, okay? Now, let's go to the next slide. This is what I pulled out. So these are some of the questions I had, some of the comments that I had. And just by looking at it, you can see that there's greater depth, right? How do we get kids to that point? We got to model it. You have to guide them through it. It's that gradual release. I've got to model a question, then they come up with a question. I have a comment, I give them an example, then they've got to come up with that. Go to the next one there, Jen. And then those are my personal connections that I have about the text. So we're in like a much deeper stance with the reading. It also gives more engagement, motivation, and I see it over and over and over again in classrooms. Then when we get away from, the who, what, when, where, and start asking these kinds of questions or a bigger essential question, it is more motivating. The kids are actually reading the text and they're reading more in depth. And it's really about setting those expectations for our students as well in order to get them to that point and those levels of greater depth in their reading. So so those are just two really quick just an example of just what that difference is if you're just reading the main, looking for the main idea and 3 pieces of evidence. And I also want to argue too that when we get into more complex text, like when we're reading primary source documents in a social studies classroom, in a history classroom, or we're reading a science article, or we're reading Shakespeare, there is more than one controlling idea, main idea. There's usually multiple. And so it's about identifying those ideas that are in complex text and how they're developed with details and evidence. That's how we move the needle to get kids into deeper levels of reading comprehension. So I want to congratulate all of you because, wow, we got to the last slide. And Danica is going to come on too to give you a couple of additional pieces of information. But congratulations, you know everything that you need to know now about reading and literacy in 1 hour. How about that?
Pretty impressive.
Just 1 hour. We did it in 1 hour.
Just 1 hour.
Smart group. Yeah. Yeah. Very gifted class.
That's right. That's right. Well, I am so appreciative, Jenny and Katie, that the two of you are here with us today to work through this with us. And y'all can tell I'm in my car. And so I'm really excited to be able to go back and look at the slides and the resources that you shared, because there really was just a lot of great information throughout this session. So for those of you that I haven't met before, I'm Danica Lewis. I'm the director of the Literacy Center here at First Education. And so I'm just so happy that we were able to have Katie and Jenny join us today. And so this is just kind of the end part of our webinar where I thank them, but also let you all know that, this is the work that we do at First. And at the Literacy Center, this is, specifically the work that we do. And so if you, learned a lot from Jenny and Katie today and you're interested in learning more with them or with some of the other folks that we work with as well, we'd love to hear from you. So you've got my email address there and our literacy website there. We do a lot of work on site with schools, as well as, virtual webinars and trainings. But the main thing that I want you to know about what we offer to schools and teachers is customized learning. And so if you heard things today that you think sound really helpful and could be helpful to the rest of your staff, we'd love to talk about how we could make that happen and, make it meaningful for the situation and the structures that you exist in. So we also do offer instructional analysis to help you figure out where to get started. If you've got so many things you want to work on and you just don't quite know where to begin, we're always happy to help with that as well. So let me know if there's anything that we can do to help you out. You've got my email address there, as well as from the email where I sent you the information for today. So Katie and Jenny, we are so grateful and appreciative to the two of you for sharing all of this wonderful information over the last 60 minutes. Not only did we have great participants, but we had great presenters as well, who managed to share all this in 1 hour's time. So we definitely appreciate that. So thank you so much.
Thanks to First Ed. Yeah, thanks to First Ed and you, Danica, for inviting us and giving us the opportunity to share what we know. And I also include in the link it's a shameless plug for my podcast. I have to prove to my grandson that I'm hip and cool. So yeah, that I've got a podcast.
That's really important.
Yeah, I got to be cool with the grandson.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here today. We will share this recording. So if you had to be in and out just a little bit, you will have access to this recording. I'll send it out within about a week's time. This was a free webinar. So if you've got colleagues at your school that, are interested in hearing about this as well, don't hesitate to share with them. And again, just reach out if there's anything we can do to help. Thanks, everybody.